and moving the volume down a little bit. Sorry for any eardrums. I exploded over last time. Um, Let me see. Because I should be here somewhere. Where am I? Where have I gone? There I am. All right. So, it's been a little while since we did any reading anyway. And I felt like now might be the time. I didn't get to do any of it Monday. So, I'm gonna try and do some reading today. Why not? It's probably gonna be fun. Maybe I can actually hear what I'm doing when I have the correct headphones on my head. Oh boy. One of those days, is it? Absolutely delightful. I'm so, so happy. Oh. All right. Um, I wonder if we could maybe um if we could maybe if I maybe should have done a better way of setting up. Probably the answer is yes. Likely the answer is yes. Oh boy. Let's see. I am going to switch us over to a little slideshow, so you guys have something to look at that is not me while I'm sitting here. If I can maybe move myself in the proper direction. I'ma just make myself a little smaller and put myself a little bit in the corner. You guys can sort of enjoy the background as well. It's all assets from the game, from Dragon Age Vilgard. Wow, the game, like you guys know what I'm talking about. It's all assets from Vilgard, backgrounds and stuff. Hello, Lebanon. Good to see you again. There we go. I have no idea, because I only briefly read over The Horror of Hormak real quick weeks ago. Things are pretty good. I am getting started up. So it took a while for me to get around to reading, just stuff. Hi, Jazz. Nice to see y'all arriving. But I figured, you know, I haven't been able to do any reading past Monday, and then the week before that also, so it's been bleh. So we're gonna read now. We're gonna read now. I'm gonna read to you now. So that's what we're gonna do. What I was, I think, getting at is that the backgrounds that I found are more related to the Grey Wardens in Dragon Age the Vilgard. This is like all Anderfell stuff. And then I read the Horror of Hormak over a little bit, and I was like, this doesn't take place in the Anderfells at all. I'm an idiot. But whatever. You guys are getting pretty backgrounds, hopefully. Maybe that'll... I don't know. We'll see. I hope y'all don't I hope y'all don't mind. I am going to pull this up for myself, and then if it's all the same to you guys, I figured I might just start reading. So, yeah. This is The Horror of Hormak from Tevinter Nights, Dragon Age Tevinter Nights. Yay! This one is written by John Epler. I feel like this is one of the gross ones. So bear with me. It's really disgusting. Hit me. Let me know and hit me. And we can maybe switch to something else. But like I said, I was going to read this a couple of weeks ago, and then I did not, and I have since purged it from memory. Anyway. The horses smelled it first. They were warden horses, raised around the fetid stench of darkspawn, trained from birth to tolerate their smell and not to spook easily as most animals. They had stood strong in the face of charging ogres on more than one occasion, but mere hours after entering the Navaran forest, the horses that Warden Ramesh's small party rode on began to stamp and whinny uneasily, clearly frightened. Something here they don't like. Lesha looked wary. She was a Tevinter mage, confident to the point of cockiness, and not generally prone to fear. Don't tell me you don't feel it. Something's wrong. The whole place feels broken. She glanced at Ramesh and added, Besides, there's only 2 of us, not even a full expedition group. We should be waiting for reinforcements. Ramesh sighed and ran his hand through his hair. The hell of it was, he knew exactly what Lesha meant. The air was thick, almost suffocating. It pressed down on them, and there was an acrid quality to it that burned his lungs, though he could not identify exactly what it was. And she was right about the rules, too. On a rescue mission, you always took more wardens than you had lost. Ostensibly to carry out the living, but more practically so you could kill whatever the previous group had not managed to kill. Numbers helped on that front. But those rules had been written before Adamant, before Ostagar, when they still had the numbers to keep patrols whenever they needed. Besides, Senior Warden Jorphus' group was now 8 days overdue. Unnecessary risks were not something Ramesh liked to take, but by the time reinforcements came, those 8 days would be 15. Add another 10 to make their way back out this far, and it'd be a month, at which point protocol was to treat them as dead. They could ill afford such losses. And the other reason. Something unsaid, unfinished, between the 2 of them. Jovis had meant everything to Ramesh once, but he pulled away. Death walked with every warden, and you learned to bury grief beneath duty. Easier to do that, it seemed, before grief's edge had been honed by love and friendship. But regret had a weight of its own, and he wished he'd seen that sooner. He shook his head. We press on. We're a half-day's ride from where Jovis's mining expedition last reported from. Could be they're fine, Ramesh added. But until we get there, we won't know. And if they aren't fine, and we turn back now, that's that. Lesha inclined her head, accepting the gentle rebuke, but the expression of unease never left her face. Understood, sir. It just feels... something's wrong about these woods. Feels like the air hates me. Wants me to die. She shook her head. I know, it don't make sense, but that's how I feel. Just don't like this. Ramesh laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. Me neither. But we've got a job to do. Misgivings will keep. He hesitated, then added, That said, one hand on your weapon, and an eye to the woods. They rode on in silence, and Lesha's expression of unease deepened, became grim. The air grew heavier, the trees thicker, and even the sounds of the wind through the trees became muted, as if the outside world wanted no part of these woods. 23 years, Ramesh had been a warden. His calling was nearly upon him, and if he'd been alone, if only he had felt the palpable sense of dread that filled the woods, he may have thought it was that. It reached every warden differently. But Lesha had only been a warden for 2. If she could feel it, if she sensed what Ramesh did, it was something real. They'd gone another several miles down the muddy trail when, without warning, Lesha's horse reared violently, throwing her from her saddle and galloping madly back the direction they'd come from. Ramesh cursed and leapt from his horse. Lesha got to her feet shakily and met his inquisitive expression with a nod. She was fine then. He leapt back on his own horse and wheeled it around to chase after Lesha's. Minutes passed. He rode hard, following the crushed underbrush that marked the horse's path, and from the crashing and snapping ahead of him, he seemed to be gaining on it. His own horse reared suddenly, danced backward a few steps, and Ramesh gripped the reins tightly, avoiding his own tumble into the underbrush through sheer bloody-mindedness. Patting the horse, he whispered to it, calming it, when he realized that the noise of movement ahead had completely stopped. Tugging gently on the reins, he turned his own animal back toward the path ahead and started forward. The noise came suddenly and filled the forest. It was a tremendously large sound, and somehow palpably fleshy at the same time. There was a soft and liquid quality to the roar that sent goose flesh crawling up Ramesh's entire body. It was a roar that marked cleanly the delineation between predator and prey, and it was accompanied by a terrified whinny that was cut off by a sickening crunch. There was another loud crash, a rustling noise, and then silence. A full minute passed before Ramesh was able to get his breathing under control, and another minute before his horse would even move. But slowly, inevitably, they pushed forward toward the source of whatever that horrendous exultation had been. Trees had been snapped, not sideways across the trunk, as if by an axe, but vertically, struck from below by some tremendous force. In the middle of the clearing, a massive mound of dirt had been displaced. Recently, too, judging by the dampness of the soil, while smaller disturbances were visible around the edges of the clearing. Of Lesha's horse there was no sign, and no evidence that it had left the clearing at all. The pattern of destruction had a clear edge, and beyond the edge the woods seemed undisturbed, the only evidence of any creature's passage being the trampled underbrush on the makeshift path that Ramesh and his own animal had followed into the clearing. There was something else, too. The by now too familiar scent of decaying foliage, sickly sweet and pungent, certainly, but something else, too. Something sharper, saltier. It smelled like the sea on a stagnant day, the smell of brine and seaweed. Neither smell was unfamiliar to Ramesh, yet here, leagues away from the nearest ocean, there was a menace to it that troubled him. And what exactly had happened to Lesha's animal? The tableau in front of Ramesh suggested it had been dragged underground. The deep roads were nearer to the surface here than they were in most parts of Thedas, but the speed with which the animal had been taken suggested something other than darkspawn. Tapping his own horse's flank with his boot, he spurred it forward, through the gap in the clearing that he'd entered, and back to where he'd left Lesha. Small sippy break. We having a good time so far. I know it's only been like maybe 10 minutes. I love how moody the story is so far. All of the Grey Warden stuff always lends itself so good to like really moody, really poopy shit. Probably nothing has happened to the horse. The horse is probably fine. At any rate. I know it's been a good while, but if there's anything, because Dragon Age obviously is a series that I am very interested in, and I know a lot about, but not all of you who are listening may know a lot about it. So, should you have any questions or any, I don't know, maybe you want to know something about something, and then let me know. I can maybe help y'all out. But until now, but for now, at least, I am just going to keep on reading. Know more about the first two games than newer ones. I mean, the newer ones did add more lore stuff, but Grey Wardens have been around for. Grey Wardens and Darkspawn are at like the heart of it, so in that sense, you're pretty good. In that sense, you're pretty good. I am I guess among my friend group now, a pretty notorious Dragon Age fangirl, so I will gush about all of the games and hate them in the same breath because I don't know, have a difficult relationship. A difficult relationship with them. But yeah, no, I really enjoy them. And I know a lot about the lore as a consequence, so if there's any lore questions that you need answering, hit me up and I'll do my best. Just keeping a side eye on all y'all in chat. He found her off the side of the trail in a small clearing, and she wasn't alone. A third figure lay in front of her, a crumpled form in the blue and silver. A warden. One of Jovis's, more than likely. Dismounting his horse, he sprinted forward. Lesha half turned to speak. She came stumbling out of the woods. She's raving mad. She looked back at the wounded warden. I'm doing what I can, but I'm not a healer. Something's wrong with her on the inside. More than just cuts are bleeding. Won't tell me what's wrong, though. Won't even look at me. What do you mean by raving? What exactly is she saying? Ramesh asked. Nothing that makes even a bit of sense. Hear for yourself, though, Lesha said. Ramesh moved over to where the wounded warden was lying, her head propped up by one of Lesha's saddlebags. Her skin was a ghostly white, and her breathing labored. A hole had been torn through her armor at the stomach, and a wound gaped. We didn't know. And now we do. She giggled, a high-pitched noise that sent a shiver down Ramesh's spine. Got to know, though. Oh, yes, we know better. They taught us, gave us a lesson. A coughing fit interrupted her, and she spat several times as if to clear the foul taste out of her mouth. Ramesh gave Lesha an inquisitive look, and she shook her head. Whatever toxin's in her system is one that must work its way out naturally. No response to my magic. I can make her comfortable, nothing more, she said. Ramesh crouched beside the injured warden and leaned forward. One recruit Friedel, is it? She nodded once, slowly, still refusing to meet his gaze. Senior Warden Ramesh. My name, I mean. We're here looking for Jovis. You're part of his group? She nodded again, this time faster. Good. Tell us what happened then. We went too far. Too deep. Something's down there. Something bad. We thought it was Darkspawn. But it's worse. Because it's different, you see. Not the same at all. Not twisted, but made. Created. 3 died. They were lucky. I wasn't. Escaped, but not really. She met Ramesh's gaze then, and Ramesh recoiled in horror. Her eyes were gone, clawed out. Beside him, he was dimly aware of the sound of Lesha retching in the bushes. Friedel began to weep, tears streaming forth from the empty sockets. Don't make me go back. Not there, not where they are. I will not. I cannot. We must leave this place to her, to them. She began to hit the ground. Sobs turned to screams that grew louder and louder. They build it for her. They wait for her. I am free. I paid the price. She started to scream once more. Then came shrieks of pure terror intermixed with a laughter that contained not even a trace of humor. The screams grew until the volume was painful. With a suddenness that caught Ramesh off guard, she leapt forward, knocking him to the ground and running past him into the woods. She nearly made it out of the clearing into the trees when blue light streamed from Lesha's hands, surrounding the warden, enveloping her. She made it another dozen steps before staggering to her knees and then collapsing to the ground, blessedly silent. Sleep magic. Should have done that sooner. Lesha paused and then added quietly, It's a small mercy, but the one I can give. What do you think it is? Ramesh asked, massaging his wrists. They were purpling and bruised. Tomorrow they would hurt more. Fear. Whatever she has seen, it's broken her, poisoned her mind. Lesha looked at Ramesh. We cannot take her with us. If we do, it will break her beyond all repair. Right now. She gave a helpless shrug. She will live, and with time her mind may heal, but if we take her back to where Jovis is, she corrected herself hastily, we may as well strike her down ourselves. Leaving her is not an option. We must press forward, but if we leave her like this, food or no food, she'll die. Lesha began to interrupt, and Ramesh held up a hand. A day, maybe 2. By then, maybe, we can leave her with supplies while we venture on. He looked her in the eyes. Any questions? There were none. They worked quickly, building a makeshift litter out of several fallen branches and the canvas from a spare bedroll that Ramesh's horse still carried. Placing Friedel on the litter, they tied her to it with several ropes. It was not a step he relished taking, but the way her eyes had been torn out suggested to him that she'd done the deed herself. Who's to say what else she would do if her hands remained free? They pitched their tents, working quietly and competently. Ramesh had set his own small one across the clearing from Lesha, an extra tent, normally meant for keeping supplies dry. He'd given his other tent to her, to replace the ones that had been lost with her horse. One Friedel's litter they set up under the canopy of a large tree, tying the remaining horse to a tree on the opposite side of the clearing. They built a small campfire and lit it with flint and steel. Unspoken agreement had Lesha saving her energy in case it was needed. They ate, and then Ramesh should first shift on guard. Midway through the shift, a sharp inhalation of air and slight rustle of cloth told him that Friedel had awoken. He looked across the clearing at her, waiting for her to move, but she remained silent and nearly still, showing no sign of her previous aggression. Then she began to whisper something to herself, over and over. A nearly silent litany. Ramesh came closer, trying to hear what it was she said, but his presence quieted her, and he returned to his seat. A few minutes passed, and the litany started up again, nearly silent, unsettling. The next several hours passed unremarkably, and soon it was time for the change of the guard. Stretching, her hair tied up behind her with a leather strap, Lesha came out from her tent and exchanged nods with Ramesh. He gestured vaguely to the direction of the injured warden. She's awake. Not doing much, though. Ramesh stood up, and fatigue flooded his limbs. It had been a full day since he'd slept, riding hard to where Jovis had disappeared. Wake me up if anything interesting happens. Lesha nodded, and Ramesh vanished into his own tent, closing the flap. He did not fall asleep, not immediately. Instead, from his boot he pulled a piece of parchment, tied with a long waxed string. A message from Jovis, 15 years past, telling him to wait. They would find each other again. That duty, that sacrifice, could mean a whole lot of things. Ramesh had been too proud, too foolish to acknowledge what time it meant to him. 23 years was a long time, long enough to gather many regrets, but few had the same bitter taste to Ramesh as that one. He stared at the paper, reading the note again and again and again, a mantra across the decade. He hadn't said what he should have said. He hadn't said what he should have said then, but this was another chance, if it wasn't already too late. Folding the paper up, he placed it back in his boot carefully and pulled his blankets around him. Sleep took longer to come than he wanted, but it finally did. Now there, hydration break. I'm gonna take little hydration breaks in the little I guess mini chapters, I guess. to well hydrate. What what am I going on about today? Sections, I guess, yeah. They're little like asterisk sections, like little page breaks in between. Line breaks. Tumblr read mores. Oh boy. Okay. So, quick look over what's immediately coming up. Oh, scenes, that works. So, a quick look over the scene that's just coming up. This is going to maybe contain some body horror. Likely containing some body horror. Which, I mean, for a story that's called The Horror of Hormak. So, be wary of that. Yeah, okay. Be wary of that. It's only, that's half a page, that's one page. It's only a little over 2 pages, so I'll try to get through it quickly if it's too gross. I think it'll be fine, but like, for reading, I have kind of a stomach for these things, so we'll see. In his dream, Jovis, as he'd been nearly 15 years ago, was walking away down the path through the thick Navarran woods. But no matter how fast Ramash ran, no matter how quickly he covered the distance between them, Jovis was always out of reach. Finally, he caught up with him and, grabbing his shoulder, turned him around. His eyes were gone, clawed out, and a sickening grin split his face. He reached toward Ramesh, toward his eyes, and pain erupted. Ramesh screamed. The sound came again, but this time from right outside his tent. He leapt upright, his blade in hand, before he had properly and fully awoken. The scream came again, quieter, and somehow wetter, then tapered off. The sound of the horses whinnying in panic, in terror, replaced it, and then a snapping sound, and quickly receding hoofbeats. Nothing moved. The remains of the previous evening's campfire, a few embers still glowing faintly, sat in the middle of the clearing. Lesh's tent was still there, intact, and the litter that had carried Warren recruit Friedel. The restraints were torn. No, not torn. Chewed through. A thin, grayish fluid traced a path through the underbrush toward the edge of the clearing. He followed it, into the bushes, away from the camp. And there, a dozen steps into the trees, lay the crumpled remains of Warden Friedel. She chewed through more than her restraints. Her wrists were torn open, tendons and arteries gone. Like a wild animal had savaged her, but the blood around her mouth told the truth of the story. Whatever had happened to her, whatever she'd seen with Jovis, it had done its work. Lesh had been half right. Friedel had been broken. Something else. Her mouth, mixed with the blood, a trickle of something else. That same thin, grayish fluid that traced her path from the litter. The reek of brine of the ocean was stronger, more present. He cast around the clearing, finding what he was looking for, a small branch. Whispering an apology, he forced it between her teeth and pried open her mouth. The gray fluid came out in a rush. Gallons and gallons of it spilled forth into the clearing, and he leapt back. It seemed to come for minutes, far longer and far more than should have ever been inside a person. Finally, the flow abated, the stench of the ocean overpowering. Throwing the branch to the ground in disgust, he took several steps back, making sure not to step in the gray effluvia, and looked around. There was no sign of the horses. The trees that had been hitched to sturdy saplings had snapped in half, and the crushed underbrush told the rest of the story. They'd escaped then, and with them most of their supplies. Lesha came sprinting out of the woods, staff aglow and ready to use. She saw Ramesh, came over, and her eyes widened. She ran off several feet and proceeded to throw up. Ramesh did not blame her. He'd had to fight back his own nausea. I am tripping over my words again, something fierce. I'm so sorry, guys. really breaking the heavy atmosphere. And we focus. She returned, wiping her mouth with the sleeve of her robe. She forced herself to look down at what remained of Friedel, swallowing again, making an effort not to lose her meal a second time. Ramesh turned to her. Report, Acolyte. The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended, but he didn't bother correcting his tone. She spoke, eyes still fastened to the litter. I went to fetch more wood for the fire, but she was still alive. She'll hear when I left. She looked at Ramesh and made no effort to conceal the fear in her eyes. What's going on? Tell you when I know, Acolyte. The sky had already started to lighten on the cusp of dawn. He looked around the ruined camp, the few supplies that they had taken from their horses, and felt a stab of despair. The rest of their rations were on his horse, and Maker only knew where it had run off to. Between the two of them, they had 2, maybe 3 days' worth of food, and it was another half day to where Jovis had disappeared. Not to mention water. Their skins held enough for 2 full days, a little more if they carefully rationed, but Ramesh had no desire to drink from any of the brackish streams they'd seen. Build a pyre. Let's at least give her a proper end. She was one of us, died in the line of duty. But what duty was that? Something she'd seen, something that had happened to her, and he blinked away sudden tears, something that could have happened to Jovis. Almost certainly had happened to him. No. He would not let despair win, would not believe that all was already lost. He dashed the back of his hand across his eyes, wiping them, and waved off Lesha's concerned look. At least 4 days back to town. Could look for our animals, sure, find our rations, but could be we never find them. And then we're worse off. More than we are now, I mean. Jovis was fully supplied. Enough for a party 3 times the size of his. We're likely to find something there. He shook his head. I don't like this, but I don't see any other option. Lesha nodded at that. There really was no other option than to press forward, deeper into the unknown. Sippy break. I don't know if I stumble more over my words reading because I need a sip, or because I'm just thinking about it. Because I'm like thinking like, pronounce the word correctly. I do like reading aloud though. I think I mentioned it in a previous reading stream, but like at least it's getting me to read again, which is a thing that I haven't done in like forever. So that does make me very happy. That does make me very happy. And I have so many Dragon Age books to get through. Oh, the excitement. If you guys are still good, I'm just gonna keep going. Another sippy. No more banter. No more words. They walked down the path toward the mine, each in their own private world with only their thoughts for company. The silence was thick, oppressive, broken only by the muted sound of their boots on the muddy ground. They moved with purpose, Lesha lagging slightly behind and beside Ramesh, ready to act if necessary. The ground became rockier, harder, and the trees began to thin. The mountain that the path now led toward unerringly loomed in the distance, its 3 asymmetrical peaks twisting around each other. Yet still that oppressive feeling, that smell of decay remained, and seemed to grow stronger as they left the forest, not weaker. And over it all, that faint hint of brine. The path began to rise again, moving upward at a slow rate, toward those 3 spires of rock. And along the path, they began to see the first signs of civilization, albeit none that were recent. Mushrooms grew on a broken wagon at the side of the road. Houses, their windows dark and gaping, spotted the woods on either side of the path. Even, at one point, a village, long abandoned. They picked through the ruins of the latter, but found nothing useful. Whatever supplies had been there were long gone, either with the people who had fled, or perhaps more likely, claimed by those who had business at the mine. There was one other thing that Ramesh noted, though he did not mention it to his companion. Large mounds of dirt, similar to the one he'd seen upon the disappearance of Lesha's horse, were scattered throughout. He'd thought of telling Lesha about what he'd seen and heard, yet what truly was that? Disturbed dirt and a loud noise. He'd seen nothing else, not even the remains of Lesha's horse. Anything he told her was conjecture and would only stir her already fertile imagination. Finally, the woods fell away altogether, and they found themselves at the crest of a ridge. Ahead of them loomed the mountain, its 3 peaks surrounding each other in an almost serpentine fashion. Oh my goodness. A single path led forward, its destination obscured by the hills on either side of it. They followed that path then, and turned the corner to the scene of destruction. At the base of the mountain slope, broken weapons of both Warden and Darkspawn make littered the ground. Trampled tents and broken equipment told the rest of the story, as did the blood that covered everything. There had been a fight here, a big one. But not a single Warden body. Darkspawn corpses, dozens of them, but no evidence that any of Jovis's party had been slain. Yet the sheer amount of blood splashed everywhere suggested something grimmer. Darkspawn ichor was easily distinguishable, even after it had dried, but this was something different, which meant that it had to come from the missing party. Where were they, then? Beside him, Lesha's staff was in her hands, magical energy thrumming, ready to be loosened. Ramesh had his own daggers out, an involuntary reaction to the scene before him, and realized his own hands were sore from how tightly he was gripping the hilts. He took a breath and let it out. Once, twice, 3 times, forcing calm. Yes, things looked grim. There was, in fact, quite a lot of blood, and that rarely spoke to anything good. But there were no bones, which would have been left if the remains had indeed been eaten. There was still a chance that Jovis and his wardens were alive. He turned to his companion, making a show of sheathing his daggers. We should split up, figure out what exactly happened here. Look for anything that seems, well, relevant. He shook his head, then added, Looks grim, I know, but no bodies. That tells me they could still be alive, and that means we're going after them. But let's make sure there's a them to go after. Lesha nodded, her expression stoic, and moved deeper into the camp. He walked through the center of the carnage, looking for a sign, for something to hold on to. Damn it, Jovis, he whispered. Despite his reassuring words to Lesha, he feared the worst. That there were no bodies meant very little, as she knew. Perhaps they'd been captured, or any number of 100 other things that meant they were dead and this whole adventure was pointless. Still, he searched. There were no campfires, no signs of cots or bedrolls. This was meant to be a fortifications, then, not a camp. There were some provisions, but no more than would last a single day. They'd expected a fight and clearly gotten one. That they'd been overwhelmed seemed obvious. The number of Darkspawn corpses was enormous. And not just Hurlocks, but Genlocks, Shrieks, even a couple of emissaries. But there was something different about these Darkspawn. The mutations that gave rise to their mindless hordes were far from consistent, yet here he saw variants unlike any he'd previously known. Hurlocks with extra arms, Shrieks with the powerful legs of a Genlock, and an emissary with a second head. Something strange, Normally, he would have written it off as merely being another aspect of the Darkspawn's physiology that was inexplicable, but combined with everything else, it was disturbing. Here! Over here! Lesh's voice rang from across the clearing, carrying a note of excitement. Ramesh ran over to find her standing in front of a large hole in the earth. Peering inside, he saw stairs leading down. Bloody boot prints, not of Darkspawn, but of men. Jovis and his wardens. The flame of hope flickered once again in Ramesh's heart. The smell of brine was stronger here, more potent than anywhere else in the clearing, and it seemed to be coming from below. Beside him, Lesha muttered a word and her staff began to glow. She pushed it inside the entrance to the hole, giving light to the darkness within. The edges of the circle cast by Lesha's spell revealed a small staircase that descended into an antechamber slightly larger than the clearing above, carved with a skill and delicacy that rivaled the works of Orzammar or even Kal'Sharok. At the other end of the chamber, a doorway and a second staircase beyond that, which spiraled into the darkness, the entire space lit by the glow of lyrium. And above the entrance, written in dwarven runes, a single word: Hormak. Ugh, I was doing so well, and then near the end, it kind of lost. Mm-hmm. I think in a previous Dragon Age Origins stream, I mentioned something about how so Dragon Age Origins Awakening goes into a little bit about how Darkspawn are created, which there are these delightful things that are called brood mothers, which give birth to more Darkspawn. And then depending on the race of the person that is turned into a brood mother, they produce different types of Darkspawn. So I believe from the top of my head, it's dwarven brood mothers that make the Genlocks, the small guys. I think it's the humans that make the Herlocks. And the Kunari make ogres, which supposedly explains why there's not a lot of ogres around, because, well, Darkspawn just kind of rarely fight Kunari, I guess. I think the elves make the shrieks, and then maybe the mages make emissaries, but I'm not sure. And I am a little terrified of looking this up, because this feels like the kind of thing that you don't want to learn about in grade school. I am going to look it up regardless, because why not? I'm here now. Okay, Brute Mothers, backgrounds, la la la. Uh-huh. Oh, this just makes me very uncomfortable. Yes, the race of a broodmother determines which kind of darkspawn she gives birth to. An elven broodmother will spawn shrieks, a dwarven broodmother will spawn genlocks, human broodmother spawns herlocks, and kunari or Kossath broodmother spawn ogres. So I was correct, actually. That's good. That's actually not good. That's very sad, and it makes me uncomfortable. Oh, man. I've mentioned it before, but Dragon Age Origins is the closest thing to a horror game that I have ever played willingly in my entire life. And I didn't even finish it because I was too terrified. I took one look at the brood mother and I was like, no, we're good. Never have to play this again. Oh, disgusting. So I don't know exactly where oh, and it has pictures too. I'm so happy that there's pictures. Ugh. I am currently checking the Dragon Age wiki. It's my home away from home usually. And sometimes it's the source of my most terrible nightmares. So that's grand. I remember looking up the page for wyverns the other day and just being like a little caught off guard by how upsetting wyverns look. It's like, dude, really? Is that really what you look like? That's huh. Yeah, that's the exact face that I'm making right now, Lebanon. That's like, why do I like this game? Some of the Broodmother's skills as like a boss or lead boss enemy are rotting gas, grab, spit, scream, sweep, and vomit. You can tell that shit's great. Oh, we don't like it. No, we don't like it at all. No baby. Don't like that at all. No. Was I gonna look up something else? I think I was gonna look up emissaries because I want to know where emissaries come from then. Spell it correctly. Spell it correctly, Liz. What are you doing? Show me emissary. Let's see. Emissaries are spellcasting darkspawn with abilities similar to blood magic. Appear rarely outside of a blight. When they do appear, their purpose is to ensure that the generals and commanders of the darkspawn army serve the archdemon's interests and not their own. So they are the most intelligent darkspawn. Only ones among the darkspawn that have been known to possess the ability to speak and communicate to other species. Though topics of discussion with non-darkspawn races are rather limited. You don't say. I guess it doesn't say exactly where they come from. Here, trivia. In Dragon Age Origins, there were different types of emissary for each race of Darkspawn, Genlock and Hurlock emissaries, but in Dragon Age 2, there's only one kind of emissary, identified as Darkspawn emissary. However, the Darkspawn emissary does clearly possess elven ears. Their appearance is also more in line with the appearance of powerful magi Darkspawn emissaries such as the Architect and Corypheus. Although dwarves are unable to cast spells, Genlock emissaries seem to have no trouble with it. This could be because emissaries' magic is powered by the taint. I mean, that is a possibility, and these guys do distinctly have elven ears. Why is that one giving me bedroom eyes? That's weird. Why would you draw that, artists? I'm having a page open on the Dragon Age wiki. I loathe to show it to you, but it's like a little character study of how the emissaries are supposed to look in Dragon Age 2. And in the bottom corner there's just one just kind of like laying back and giving you bedroom eyes with like a coquettish little salad fingers like little wave. Oh, it's the weirdest shit. Absolutely delightful. Oh, man. Oh, I'm getting distracted. I'm sorry. If you leave me on the Dragon Age wiki page, I will be here all day. We will be here all day. I know, that is so unsettling. Why would they do that? I am now like the littlest bit tempted to show it to you guys. Give me a second. Just putting it on screen for a moment. Oh man. Let's see. Can I pop it in here? How do I do that again? Let me image. Okay. Let me find it real quick. Where is it? Okay. Open. Okay, so you guys should... There it is. That's the image I've been looking at. and then the one in the bottom corner is just... Look at them. That's bedroom eyes if I've ever seen one. He's lying there like, hey girl, come here off. I'm gonna put him away. I'm gonna put him away. Bye, little emissary. I won't miss you at all. Be gone. Be gone, please. There you go. Oh my goodness. Delightful. I'm so happy that we know that now. We're all richer for knowing that this exists. Oh boy. Oh, okay, well. Let me do another little sipping. And I'm gonna read, and I'm gonna introduce you probably to a whole bunch of other horrors that will hopefully make you forget all about this one. Let's see, where were we? They descended the spiral staircase. The minutes stretched on as they went farther and farther into the darkness, and the smell of seawater grew even stronger. Finally, the staircase reached its end, and another door, larger, grander than before, sat open. They walked through, Lesha holding her magical light in front of them. The door opened into an enormous chamber, fallen into ruin, yet still no less grand for its current decay. It brought to Ramesh's mind the other dwarven thaigs, but none of those he'd seen were in as dire shape as this one. It made sense. The fall of Hormak had come centuries before, consumed by the Darkspawn, yet it was oddly, unexpectedly quiet. Around the chamber, the old mixed with the new, the latter being the small tents and bedrolls, as well as other signs of recent habitation. There was blood, though less of it than above, and the other destruction was lacking. Whatever had happened here had been smaller, the battle less pitched. Rusted shovels and picks leaned against the wall in neat rows. Skeletons, several of which had fallen to dust, wore the remains of dwarven armor. The remains of a mining party, or a deep roads expedition then long dead. But the halls bore more recent signs of Jovis's wardens. Guard fires had been lit at either end of the chamber. He poked at the ashes of one. Beneath them, a few embers still smoldered. He threw a few branches on, blew on them until the fire was flickering once again. Preserved foods, stored in jars, sat in neat piles next to the fires, along with several baskets full of bread and smoked meat. He reached down and picked up a loaf. The bread was hard, but showed no signs of mold. So the camp had been abandoned. Recently, but not too recently. The only entrance seemed to be the door through which they'd come. Every other doorway was choked with debris, the largest opening wide enough to admit a mouse, nothing larger. Unless they doubled back, returned up above, there seemed no place for the wardens to have gone. Something drew his eye. A half-dozen or so small drums, bearing an unknown dwarven mark, were piled at a comfortable distance from the fires. They seemed old, perhaps as old as the dwarves, but they were in remarkably good condition. Lesha was kneeling in front of them. She looked up at Ramesh's approach, and he raised a questioning eyebrow. Lyrium charges. Dwarves use them to remove obstacles, open up passages. I've seen them before, though none of this make. She stood up, absent-mindedly wiping her hands on her robe. Unfortunately, they're mostly useless without the fuse, unless you're happy to blow yourself up with them. Pardon? I've never heard of them. Never seen them. Not many surfaces have. They used them to open up some of the old tunnels on the Minrathis. She stood up and gave him a faint smile. Makes a big boom. Why here, though? Ramesh asked, frowning. There's a reason why we don't come to this part of the deep roads much. Whole place isn't stable. Dumont really did a number on it. Don't know. Mining expeditions take them along just in case. Passage collapses, something's blocking your way. A lot easier than chipping through it with a pickaxe. Must be careful, though. She looked up around uneasily. Like you said, a place like this, not properly shored up, who knows what you'll get. That sounds a little bit dangerous. Certainly. I understand it's fairly common among the dwarves, though. She hesitated, then added, good for sealing things up. Just in case you want to make sure someone, well, something, doesn't get out. She glanced around the room, looking for something. The missing fuses, maybe, or a further clue to Jovis's whereabouts. Her eyes widened. Look! Grabbing Ramesh's arm, she pointed forward into the darkness toward one of the massive stone pillars. Right there! Looks like markings of some sort. Looks like markings of some sort. Fresh too, see? No dust. Sure enough, several marks had been scratched into the pillar, and he looked at the next pillar there too, and then to the left. The same set of 3 marks had been sloppily scratched into each pillar. Whoever had done so had been in a hurry. Beside him, Lesha shifted uneasily. Looks like dwarven mining signs. Tells you who's been this way, when they're coming back. Well, I don't recognize the marks themselves, she said. You wouldn't. They are the marks of a warden. Well, some wardens, I mean. Senior ones. For Eldon specifically. Great way to keep from being abandoned in the deep roads. Look. He pointed to the closest pillar. See this? 3 marks. The first is a date. Looks like 3 days ago. That's when you leave. The second is how many of them are... Oh my goodness. Stumbling over my words, something real crazy right now. The first is a date. Looks like 3 days ago. That's when you leave. The second's how many of you there are. 6 marks means 6 wardens. And the third... He fell silent. Beside him, Lesha gave him an inquisitive look. What does the third mean? Ramesh shook his head, and there was no mistaking the grief in his voice. That's when you expect to be back. Means that if you miss that day, they're supposed to send a search party. On his other side, Lesha reached out a gloved hand and traced the mark. So when did they plan to come back? That's the thing. They didn't plan to come back. This is a warning. They don't want us coming after them. Silence filled the cavern then, somehow more oppressive than before. The flicker of hope that Ramesh had felt was gone, buried under despair and a growing sense of unease, of fear. Finally, Lesha broke the quiet, her own voice tinged with a hint of terror. We're still going after them, right? We're wardens, that's what we do. We're not just going to... Ramesh raised a hand, cutting off the argument. Don't need to convince me, I'm with you. Leave no one behind, right? There's the right thing to do and the wrong thing. Personally, I'm about the right thing. He shook his head, then added quietly, remember the oath. We're going down there and... Something itched in the back of his mind, and it took a moment for him to realize what. Darkspawn. He drew both daggers in a single practiced motion. Company. They came from the darkness. 9 Darkspawn, Genlocks and Hurlocks both, and led by an emissary. Yet, where their entrance would normally be marked by gibbering and jabbering, these were eerily silent. What's wrong with them? Lesha asked. It took Ramesh a moment to realize what she meant. They were changed. Different. One Hurlock had the tail of a scorpion, another a Genlock, but with a longer, thinner skull, more avian. And then there was no more time for words. They attacked as one, charging forward. A blast of fire from Lesha's staff caught the closest Genlock full on in its all-too-human face, sending it flying backward, its head a charred ruin. Another Genlock came at Lesha, its head narrower, thinner, jaw elongated. She threw herself into a slide, raising her staff in a two-handed defensive posture. The creature's jaw struck the hilt, its momentum shifting, and it went flying past her before it struck the wall with a sickening crunch. The massive darkspawn spread out, moving to separate and isolate the two wardens, with a level of cunning and guile unusual for their kind. 3 Hurlocks and the emissary moved toward Ramesh, weapons out. With the speed and flexibility that belied his years, he ducked under the swing of a brutal sword. A fist followed the sword, but where Ramesh expected the fist to be, there was instead a serpent's head. It snapped at him, missing by inches, venom dripping from its fangs. His momentum carried him under the blow, and he rose, swinging both daggers at once and taking the Hurlock's head right off its shoulders, ichor spurting from the wound. Another Hurlock blade scythed in from the left. He caught the sword on his daggers, turning the weapon away and rolling. A blast of green energy flew over his head and burned a hole through the center of the creature. The last 2 Hurlocks moved toward Ramesh, weapons drawn. He feinted toward the creature on the left. It took the bane and recoiled, when the rightmost Hurlock lunged forward. He'd been waiting for that and caught its blade on the hilt of his dagger, before shifting his grip and driving one weapon through the Hurlock's chest. It slumped forward. Fire drew a burning line down his left side as the other creature's blade caught the edge of his armor, drawing blood but nothing more. It swung again, and Ramesh parried the blow, smashing his armored fist into its face, sending it reeling in a shower of broken teeth. He caught the barest flicker of movement out of the corner of his eye and threw himself to the ground. A blast of fire moved through the space where his head had been only moments before. Ramesh rolled to his feet and turned to face the emissary. It rose above the ground, massive bat-like wings giving it an agility uncommon to its kind. Keeping out of reach of Ramesh's daggers, it fired magic blasts at him as they circled, and dove at his head, swinging its long sword, using its longer reach to his advantage. Ramesh dodged, once, twice, but then the exertion was beginning to wear on him. Suddenly, he stumbled, and the emissary, its screech of victory the only noise it had made, lunged forward. But Ramesh's mistake had been a ruse. He ducked under the blow, letting the creature's momentum carry it right into his 2 daggers. It impaled itself on his weapons and slumped dead before sliding to the ground. There was a silence. The other darkspawn were dead, dealt with by Lesha. She was sitting on a rock beside him, gingerly wrapping a bandage around her torso. She saw Ramesh's look of concern and shook her head. Got a little cocky. I had the first one off balance, misjudged it and got a piece of me. Oh, and it had a scorpion tail. Didn't seem to have any venom in it, though. Lucky break. She gingerly touched the wound and winced. Looks worse than it is. She looked at Ramesh. Why did it have a scorpion tail? And why did that emissary have wings? He could only shrug. I don't know. Never seen anything like that. This is something new. Lesha sighed, stood up. Unless they came in from the surface, I can't think of how they got in. There must be another exit, one we didn't see. She paused, deep in thought. Ramesh was carefully silent. Her eyes brightened. Oh, of course, the warning signs. She limped to the nearest pillar. See, first one, and then it continues. She ran to the second pillar and then the third. It's a path. They marked each pillar as they hit it. Ramesh heaved himself to his feet and followed after her. The markings continued for several hundred more meters before abruptly ending, the last pillar half buried into the wall. But something was strange. Different. Ramesh was the first to vocalize it. Notice this. Only place in this whole damn room that the floor is clear. The debris and refuse that covered the ground nearly everywhere else in the chamber was completely gone in front of that one section of wall. Ramesh shook his head. Secret door, I'll be damned. He frowned. But how does it open? Lesha shrugged. I imagine it opens the same way as any other door. She pointed at the bottom of the section of wall. There, almost imperceptible, were a series of grooves, handholds, barely visible. Ramesh gave Lesha an approving glance, and she smiled faintly, some of her usual bravado restored. Let's see where it goes, Ramesh said. Sippy break. very much needed sippy break. Oh my goodness. So, I don't know how we all feel about possible Vilgard spoilers. I guess maybe like but so Tevinter Nights came out like a fair bit before Vilgard, right? And it's all a whole bunch of like bait and setups for Vilgard. And some of them they wound up running with, and others of them they wound up not running with because you know the development of Vilgard was fraught with a lot of stuff. um and while they did keep the fact that the darkspawn that you encounter in Vilgard have changed from the darkspawn that everybody is used to up until that point. Um there's no darkspawn with scorpion tails or bat wings in Vilgard, which I would have been kind of cool to see. I'm not gonna lie, that would have been kind of awesome. That would have been kind of a little awesome. But it was not meant to be. Too bad, so sad. More sippy. Okay, we are slowly coming. The buildup is going somewhere at some point, I'm pretty sure. I am going to see how many pages it still is to the end of this. And we are currently at page where? We are currently at page where? I don't think, no, we've read that. Okay, so it's about, like, 10 more pages. And, like, 2 or 3 more scenes, I guess, if I did a really quick look correctly. So, I'll just keep on going. We'll have another little sippy break at the next scene. And, I don't know. We'll see what time we're done. Maybe we can, sorry. Maybe we can chat a little bit about the story when I'm done. Well, we'll see. Where are we? The shrill screech of stone grinding on stone filled the room as Ramesh hooked his fingers into the grooves of the giant slab and heaved upward with all his might. It resisted, then slowly moved, sliding within the rock above to some hidden alcove. With a grunt of effort, Lesha rolled a large boulder forward and under the door. "All right, back up." She did, and he released the door. He leaped backwards, safely out from the door's massive weight. It started to slide back down before encountering the resistance of the boulder. There was a moment of uncertainty where the doorway gouged a small groove into the top of the stone, but finally it stopped, braced open. Warm air trickled out of the passageway, the stench of brine and decay now overpowering. Several steps in, the passageway sloped downward and seemed to curve gently inward, forming a spiral ramp that led even deeper into the darkness. Ramesh took a deep breath, the air stinging his lungs. Beside him, the wood of Lesh's staff creaked as she tightened her grip until her knuckles were white. "I assume this is where Jovis and his team went. Makes sense to go this way. No time like the present, right?" The confidence in her words was absent in her tone. Ramesh nodded, though his every instinct warned him against venturing down the fetid passage. Anyone still alive, they'll be this way. Count out 8 hours. If we don't find them by then, we come back, all right? Ramesh said, noting the strain in his own voice. Lesha nodded. Taking deep breaths, like swimmers about to plunge into a frozen lake, they started down the winding passageway, deeper into the darkness, deeper into the bowels of the earth. They continued in silence for what seemed like hours, neither wanting to give voice to their fears. And soon the lack of conversation felt like a necessity. The ideas of their words echoing down the seemingly endless tunnel and awakening something gnawed at them. The slope of the ground started to abate then, and the walls began to take on a more sculpted appearance. Blank rock gave way to carvings, mostly too worn and damaged to make out. Lesha paused in front of one image that had largely survived. It was a simple painting of 3 figures, a supplicant, a priestess, and a monster. Lesha was the first to break the silence. This reminds me of something. What exactly? She shook her head. Almost like Avar cave paintings, but dwarven maybe? Ramesh leaned in and squinted. They look more elven to me. At least the people in the picture do, I mean. It's not about the people. Look, every culture has their own artistic signature, something that makes it theirs. Tevinter is all about sharp angles. Freldon is hard and brutish, and Olay is delicate and opulent. Dwarves are, well, simple is the wrong word, but they get right to the truth. If it's dwarven, what's it say? Not sure, but look, it's the same image repeated, with slight variations. She pointed to another painting that was partially intact. 3 figures, the supplicant, the queen, and the monster. It said the person and the monster change. Not a lot, but a little, enough to tell. But the priestess remains. She was right. The creature changed a bit each time, as did the figure, but the priestess remained the same, or at least almost the same. It was perhaps the oppressive nature of this place acting upon his worst fears, but it seemed to him that the priestess's smile grew a little wider and a little crueler with each subsequent image. His every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to abandon Jovis and his wardens to whatever fate they had found. His training, his oath, even they told him it was too late. Turn back. There was nothing more that could be done for his comrades. I don't like this place. It's just wrong. It's the only word I can think of. Lesha's voice still carried that note of fear, but it was sharper now, more distinct. It was a sentiment that Ramesh sympathized with deeply. But something more than duty drew Ramesh forward. Words unspoken, and something greater than a simple oath. The Warrens were his family, and Jovis would again be something more. He could not more turn his back than he could tear off his own arm. If he did abandon Jovis, if he made the cold and simple calculation, what returned to the surface would no longer be Ramesh. You should go. Get out of here. Only one of us needs to risk their life. He started back down the corridor before doubt and fear could change his mind. He'd only gone a few steps when Lesha caught up to him. He gave her a look, equal parts gratitude and concern, and she smiled tightly in response. They continued down the passageway. Around them, the walls grew smoother, larger. Delicate carvings started to appear, then flowers and creatures Ramesh did not recognize. Finally, the hallway came to an end. In front of them, 2 massive stone doors hung partway open. They stood there a long minute. There was something menacing about the doors. Unbidden, his thoughts turned to crocodiles, jaws hanging open, waiting for the lunch to come to them. It was yet another minute before he screwed up his courage enough to proceed. Moving together, they walked slowly, deliberately, through the opening. Woo! We're getting so close to the spoopy bits, you guys. I do really enjoy the build-up in this story. It's nice. It's fun. And with fun I mean it's kind of terrifying and I hate it. So you can tell that it's good. So the wall carvings are really interesting. Especially considering who we are about to meet. The delightful being responsible for all of the fun stuff that that Lesha and Ramesh have been encountering this entire time. It's good shit. Love it. Very excited about it. If you guys are all still doing good, I am going to keep on keeping on. Let's see. Yeah. There was no question in his mind that these ruins were elven in nature. While dwarven architecture remained the rule in the Deep Roads, there were exceptions. From time to time, wardens would find unmistakably elven architecture scattered among dwarven works. This, however, was exclusively entirely elven. There were no dwarven works interspersed throughout, not even any sign of the darkspawn that filled so much of the underground. And this chamber was nearly pristine. The usual signs of age, of water dripping from above or cooling from below, were absent. Debris was scattered around on the ground in places, broken vessels and shattered chests, but the room itself was intact. Fluted columns receded into the darkness above, carved in patterns that seemed to shift depending on how you looked at them, their surface smooth to Ramesh's touch, speaking to the quality of the work and the fineness of its carvings. On the surface of the walls were carved massive bas-reliefs, running in 3 parallel bands and disappearing into the darkness in either direction. The detail was exquisite, and Ramesh quickly realized that what he first thought was to be some kind of paint or pigmentation was in fact millions of tiny gemstones set into the stone. The images engraved onto the stone seemed almost alive, each one a perfectly frozen moment as the actors within marched through their stories. On the topmost band, stately elven kings and queens held court, their people kneeling before them in respectful supplication. On the middle, scenes of healing and succor, of disease and injury being drawn forth from the sick and dying by elven mages. And on the bottom, Aravels, far more elaborate and grandiose than any that Ramesh had ever seen, pulled by armies of Hala toward distant mountains, one of which, he realized with a start, was that same mountain that they were now beneath, the 3 jagged peaks that twisted around each other, easily distinguishable in the detailed carvings. It was, taken as a whole, magnificent, and yet the more he stared at it, the more disquieting it became. There was something slightly off, something that set his teeth on edge and his palms itching for the comfort feel of his weapons. Not one specific thing, but a what is that word? I am sorry, I am not a native English speaker, and sometimes words are complicated. Hi, Leia. Preponderance. Is that a word? I mean, it's in the book, so I guess it's the word. Not one specific thing, but a preponderance of little things all added up to an aura of quiet, deliberate menace. The striations on the columns, random at first, began to form patterns before Ramesh's eyes. The same symbol, the horns of a Hala, repeated on each column. The symbol seemed to shift, changing in an inexplicable way that made Ramesh's eyes water. He tore them away, focusing instead on the bas-reliefs that ran around the chamber. Yet even they suddenly seemed wrong. The lowest band of carvings, the Hala pulling the Aravel, was off. The Hala were different, wrong. They had too many horns for one, and a harder, more rounded look than was normal. A look that was almost insectile. And the horns themselves were longer and rigid, organic somehow, and the Aravels were unlike any he'd seen. The windows were barred, and they bore more resemblance to a prison ship than anything else. The middle band, with its scenes of healing, seemed now twisted and wrong. No longer did it seem as though mages were drawing corruption and disease out of the wounded and infirm, but instead they forced it in, pushing it through and into the fallen bodies. The expressions on the faces of those elven rulers betrayed a contempt that was almost palpable. Oh my god, why is... Suddenly there are difficult words here that I don't know. Beatific. Beatific smiles. I guess? I don't know how to... I'm assuming that's how I pronounce it, so I'm going to redo the sentence and pronounce it that way. This is my show. I do what I want. The expression on the faces of those elven rulers betrayed a contempt that was almost palpable. The beatific smiles edged with disgust and disdain for the creatures at their feet. And the subjects, far from kneeling in reverence as Ramesh had first thought, seemed more to be cowering in terror. A single word. Lesha exchanged a glance with Ramesh and shook her head once. She'd seen it too then. The urge to turn back, to return to the surface, was even stronger in this room. But a strangely rhythmic hum was growing louder and seemed to be coming from the other end of the cavernous space. One more room, then, and they'd leave. They moved quickly, purposely, through the massive chamber. The bas-reliefs started to repeat the same images as before. They paid them little mind, having already had their appetite for his strange art soured. Finally, they reached the opposite end of the space. Massive doors, at least 100 feet wide, were set into the wall. But there, to the side, the path showing signs of greater wear than anywhere else in the chamber, a smaller door, the size of a single person. Not wanting to spend any more time than they absolutely needed to in that cursed space, they moved quickly. The door had a simple handle, its elaborate carvings worn smooth in places. The stench of decay, of brine, was almost overpowering here. Ramesh swallowed. He had no illusions. Whatever waited for them on the other side of the door was not to be salvation. Lesha gave him a smile, but it was forced. Ready? As I'll ever be. Holding each other's hand, they opened the door and stepped through. Rank upon rank of twisted grotesqueries filled the cave. Each one was a twisted horror of body parts assembled seemingly at random. The fanged maw of a serpent rested atop the slender neck of a Hala, moving rapidly on the limbs of a Varterol. A massive spider scurried about. Its many eyes were placed instead with the heads of a dozen serpents, each one dripping venom from exposed fangs. And in the center, a massive pool filled with a viscous gray liquid. The scent of brine wafted forth from it. Above it, a massive lyrium crystal hung suspended. It glowed with a sickly light, tinged with yellow and green. Streamers of energy flowed from it into the pool, sending it bubbling wherever it touched. They watched as a Hurlock walked toward that pool, stiff-legged. It broke the surface of the grey ichor, which reacted instantly, flowing around the creature. In moments it was completely submerged. Out of the murk rose a cocoon, iridescent and pulsing with a green light. There was a hissing sound, a flash of light, and the cocoon shattered. Yet what came out was not a Hurlock. It had the head of one, but that head rested on the body of a massive drake. "I'll make his breath," whispered Ramesh. The entire room was a menagerie of horror, each creature worse than the last. This was an army. Not Darkspawn, though. Something worse. He signaled to Lesha. It was time to leave, to warn the wardens. They turned, moving with purpose toward the exit. But Lesha, her wound still not fully healed, stumbled, her staff slipping from her fingers as she tried to brace herself. The reaction was immediate. A cacophony of sound, of voices, rose, and he could feel, more than hear, the massive stampede behind him. And then a screech, louder and deeper than any other, filled the chamber. It was more than a noise. It was a physical force, issued from a throat larger than any he'd ever seen. And then the stone they'd sheltered behind moved. It twitched and slid away. Boulder after boulder, each the same, slid past, and the creature's full length was revealed. It looked like nothing less than a massive centipede. Each segment was the size of a horse, each leg the size of a small tree. It shifted, faster than Ramesh would have thought possible, and the chamber shook with its movement. It surrounded him and Lesha, cutting off escape. Ramesh swung his daggers at one of the segments. A white substance splashed out onto the stone, where it immediately began to bubble and hiss. The daggers themselves fared little better. The blade that had bit into the creature was fast melting, turning into useless slag. The creature reared up, hundreds of legs twitching spasmodically in the air, and Ramesh gripped his sword tightly. Behind him, the hum of magic, ready to be released. Ramesh had no illusions. This was a foe beyond him. But he would make it pay for steep price with his life. He would make it pay a steep price for his life. It crashed down toward him, and he braced himself for the impact, the crushing weight. It never came. Instead, the creature jerked, spasming in midair and arcing over the pair of wardens, smashing instead into the ground beside them. The lower half rocked, sending a series of small tremors through the cavern and bringing debris tumbling down from the ceiling above. The creature twitched, thrashing side to side as if locked in battle, and started to turn. It fought against itself, its movements staccato and uneven, the actions tinged with unwillingness. Finally, whatever internal conflict it had been waging was resolved, and it turned in earnest. The massive bulk shifted, the segments retreated, and the end of the creature, the head, or what seemed most like one, descended. And with it came the greatest horror of that day. Where the creature's head should be, was instead a humanoid figure. He sat astride the creature. No, not astride it. Ramesh realized with revulsion that the figure was part of it. The chitinous exterior flowed into flesh, the lines between them blurred. His body had fused with the monstrosity, becoming one. And the face. Ramesh knew then, with horrifying clarity, what had happened to the man he had risked everything to find. What Friedel's warnings had meant, and why she had killed herself rather than come back to this gruesome place. Before him, twisted and broken, was Warden Jovis. So, that was fun. I think I skipped a little bit. I'm sorry. Hadn't guessed it was my second language. I am Dutch, actually. But thank you. I am Dutch. I did study English language and culture at university, and we were kind of sort of required / encouraged to speak English to each other, to like working during work hours. So we did, and I got pretty good at it, and I talk to most of my friends in English now, so that's it's yeah, it's a second language to me, but it's like the most second language. Ah, good shit. But thank you. Okay, we are nearly there. I think it's 4 more pages and then we're 5 more pages and then we're there. 4 more. No, it is 4. I can count. I can do math. Nearly there. It was him from the waist up, but bloated, grotesque, and his flesh flowed into that of the massive creature. His eyes stared blankly, unseeing. The mouth, too wide and lipless, stretched and moved uneasily, as if only now remembering human speech. Mesh. The voice came slowly, as if across a great gulf of memory, and possessed of an almost insectile buzz that tore at Ramesh's tattered nerves. The head turned slightly, and the eyes shifted, staring at Ramesh, through him. They focused, and in them, Ramesh recognized his friend. Tears came to his own eyes, unbidden, blurring his vision. Ramesh made no attempt to wipe them away. The memory of a past, a better time spent leagues away from this place, this broken nightmare, pressed down on him, a weight of regrets and unspoken feelings. Ramesh blanched but stood firm, meeting the monster's gaze. It blinked slowly. Behind him, Ramesh heard Lesha swallow. Is it Warden Ramesh? Yes. The voice was clearer now, more human. Yes, Jovis. Yes. It's me. Maker, what did they do to you? The Jovis thing shifted its bulk, turning so its entire body now faced Ramesh. We drank. Works differently for us. Can't just touch it, we need it inside. Takes a while. They turned us, 2 halves, 2 wholes, trying to be 2 ones. But I state me, and it hates that. It twitched, the cavern shaking in sympathy. Not forever, not for long, just for now, enough. The buzz returned to the voice, insistent. And we waited for you. Oh, yes, now you come. The creature screamed, and Jovis's voice came back. Can't let this out. Go to... bury it. Bury me. The words came out even more slowly, each one being forced through whatever will battled Jovis for control of the creature. She cannot have it. Not again. Locked for a reason. Who, Jovis? Who can't have it? The creature made a gurgling noise, and it took Ramesh a moment to realize that it was laughing. Same. Ramesh. Always the wrong question. A shudder rippled through the monstrous bulk, and the insectile buzz was back in Jovis's words. Delirium. Blow it up. Take this place down. Collapse the entrance. It started to twitch again, and the next words were muffled, forced. Stop me. Stop us. Jovis's face twisted in pain, in surprise, and he slumped forward. Ramesh started forward, his remaining weapon gripped firmly. He could do one thing at least. End Jovis's suffering. Just as he reached the warden's body, however, the eyes snapped open, now black and devoid of any humanity. The creature grinned, the expression alien and horrifying on Jovis, before letting out an ear-splitting screech and charging forward. The creature's massive bulk rushed towards Ramesh, too fast to dodge, and he braced himself for the crushing force. There was a sizzle, a scream of insectile surprise, and a massive flash of light, blinding Ramesh momentarily. When his vision cleared, he saw the wall of green light between him and the monstrous insect. Lesha's face was white with strain. Jovis, whatever his essence, his spirit that had animated his face, was gone, buried under the alien will that drove the beast as it pushed against the energy field she'd created. Little friendo, I am doing a read. You can't meow. It's distracting. Yes. Silly. Small cat pet break. Rocket likes to come up and decide when she's not had enough attention. So, sorry about that. Anyway, where were we? Lesh's face was white with the strain. Jovis, whatever his essence, his spirit that had animated his face was gone, buried under the alien will that drove the beast as it pushed against the energy field she'd created. It chittered angrily, then reared and crashed down once again, sending Lesha skidding several steps backward, but the wall held. Go! She forced out through gritted teeth. Sweat beaded on her forehead and trickled down. Not without you, Acolyte. Ramesh grabbed one of the darkspawn weapons that littered the floor of the cavern and hefted it. Good balance. Lesha shook her head, then said, Warn the wardens. Bury this blasphemy. I will buy you time. The creature redoubled its pressure on her shield, and her staff began to smoke. Her nose bled, blood trickling out both nostrils. The rest of the creatures in the chamber began to stir. One chimeric monstrosity, a bat with the tail of a scorpion, lunged past the shield, striking at Lesha. Ramesh cut it out of the air, sending its limp body tumbling to the ground, its acidic venom a hissing noise as it etched the stone. More of the creatures skittered around the edges of Lesha's shield, striking at her, striking at Ramesh. The Hurlock that they'd seen earlier breathed a jet of fire, singeing the edges of Ramesh's cloak and catching Lesha in the legs. She grunted in pain and dropped to her knees. Before her, the shield started to crack, the sheer mass of the behemoth overwhelming her reserves of energy, and it let out another shriek, this one of triumph. Despair crept over Lesha's features and over Ramesh's heart. This was it then. The end. She looked at the creature, tears in her eyes, and then past it, above it. That single lyrium crystal, as large as any he'd ever seen. He saw then the shape of her plan, of her desperation. He started to leap forward to stop her, but he was too late. The shield collapsed. The magic flew from her fingers, striking that one perfect crystal, and it exploded. Cat interruptions. She's gone now. I hope she's my plush hamster is also missing, so she's probably gone back to assault that again. The blast sent Ramesh flying, tumbling backward. He slid across the stone ground before finally slamming into the wall, his breath knocked from him. A scream of rage, of anger issuing forth not just from one throat, but from 100. The loud crack of stone filled the cavern. From above, a shower of pebbles, of rocks, and then of boulders as the ceiling began to fracture. The rock where the crystal had hung was starting to crack, the rocks spider-webbing as entire sections broke free, stalactites tumbling down and striking the ground with a crunch. And then the loudest crack of all as the ceiling finally, completely gave way. Hundreds of tons of rock avalanched down, a deafening cacophony that stole away all other sound. Like a series of dominoes, the rocks continued to fall, stones showering down from unknown caverns above. Everything in the chamber had been buried by now, but still the rock fell, as if the earth itself sought to bury every trace of what lay beneath it. The sound started to slacken, the deluge becoming a shower, a trickle, and then silence. The occasional echo of a pebble tumbling down the slope of the cave-in, but otherwise silence. And in front of him, a wall of rock taller than the chamber. Lesha had done it. He blinked back tears. In death, sacrifice. She had fulfilled her oath as well as any warden before, but Ramesh had not. He still lived. Minutes passed before he was able to stand, and it was still longer before he could tear his eyes away from Lesha's cairn. Propping himself up on the darkspawn weapon he'd taken, he started toward the entrance, a single step at a time. Behind him, a clattering sound. A pebble, and then another, and another. He turned. Slowly, impossibly, the stone was shifting. Rocks fell away, boulders, revealing the chitinous mass of the creature. The shower became an avalanche, the cacophony of falling rocks filling the room, seeming to fill time itself. Slowly it rose, pulling itself from the rubble, and before long it filled the chamber once more. The sound of chittering once again, and then it turned slowly, menacingly toward him. The face of Jovis, what had once been Jovis, creased in a smile that was in no way human. Ramesh ran. He ran through the elven ruins, up the colossal spiral slope. Beside him, always nearby came the chittering, the grinding sound of rock as the creature bore its way toward him. Even when his breath grew short, even when fatigue threatened to steal his legs from him, he pressed on. Finally, he emerged, sweating and panting, into the deep roads themselves. For a moment, Ramesh forgot where he was. Black panic threatened to steal over him then, but he fought it down, fought it back. There, the remains of the fire heat lit when they first entered the deep roads, what felt like weeks ago. Aware that he had only minutes, perhaps less, before the hideous creature pulled its way into the light, he ran toward the casks of lyrium. 2 at a time, he rolled them toward the massive door, until all dozen of them sat in a clumsily heaped pile. He remembered what Lesha had said about the fuses, pulled the note from Jovis from his boot, took the string and wrapped it. It would do. He took a stick from the nearby fire, wrapped it in cloth, and lit it. Waited. From the depths the creature broke free, stone flying upward in gouts of earth. Segment after segment poured through the hole until it was finally free. It reared, its massive bulk scraping the top of the tunnel, and looked hungrily around the chamber. It spotted Ramesh then, and shrieked, almost human note of triumph in that animalistic voice. It charged toward him, covering the ground in an impossibly short time. He had one chance and one chance only. He stood his ground, waiting. Now. Lighting the fuse of the cask he held, he rolled out of the way of the creature's charge, close enough to hear its chitin? Dang it, I've been doing it so well, and now I'm debating how I'm pronouncing it. Rasp against the fabric of his own cloak, and then threw the cask behind him. The monster tried to change its course, but couldn't, its own weight and size working against it. It slammed into the wall with titanic force, the impact shaking the cave, nearly sending Ramesh flying. It shrieked again, this time in rage, and he could hear the clattering of 100 insectile feet as it tried to right itself. He ran up the spiral staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. Through the antechamber he went, nearly losing his footing, correcting and leaping to the first stair, to the third. He only hoped he'd judged his timing properly, that he hadn't cut the fuse too short, or left it too... The earth moved, and a wall of sound, like the fist of an angry titan, lifted Ramesh, throwing him out of the entrance to the deep roads and tumbling down the side of the hill. The screech of the creature turned from rampage to pain to despair, and weakened in volume before cutting off entirely. Behind him, the earth shifted, the hill collapsing inward, downward, burying the creature with not just the roof, not just the cave, but the entire mountain. Struggling to his feet, Ramesh stumbled down the mountain. Behind him, it continued its implosion, falling in on itself and wiping away that blasphemous place. Every moment he expected to hear that scream, that insectile buzz, but it never came. Silence replaced the thunder of falling rock behind him. Thunder came again, but it was real thunder this time. The rain started to fall, a soft drizzle, the water mixing with the tears that streamed freely down Ramesh's face. Tears of mourning, of grief, for Lesha, for Jovis, for the rest of the wardens, whatever doom had taken them. But tears of relief, too. He'd made it out. He'd survived, and more important, he could tell the other wardens. Warn them about the horror, warn them about what lurked beneath Hormak, and probably elsewhere as well, because he remembered something. Something about the bas-relief he'd dismissed at the time, but which now loomed large in his memory. The mountain he brought down, the one that buried that nightmare under thousands of tons of rock, was not the only one to which the Aravels brought their prey. There had been, before the image is repeated, 11 others. And that is the end. That is the end of Horrors of Hormak. It is surprising that the story is titled Horrors of Hormak, spelled Hormak, and then the place is referred to as Hormok, like Hormok. Like, y'all. you couldn't have had an editor just like check that for like 2 more seconds. Oh. But that was Horrors of Hormak. Horrors HOH. It's a good story. I do really enjoy it. Like the build up, I am myself I am a really big scaredy cat, but I do like spooky stories and psychological horror. Leia, if she was still here, could attest to that. I like, you know, things that are not quite humans smiling at you entirely too broadly, and like, you know, like unnatural quirking of heads and jerking of limbs and that kind of stuff. And the body horror in this one is just legitimately like so much fun. Really enjoy it. So that was good. Yeah, that was a good story. I'm very happy. Okay, I'm looking ahead a little bit. The next story is called Callback, and it's by Lucas Christensen. I am not going to read that right now because we've almost been at this for 2 hours, and if I can stop a little earlier to, you know, be awake for work time. On time. It was, right? I really, really enjoy it. It's a good story. It's I don't know if it's one of my favorites of Tevinter Nights so far. I like it a bunch, but I also really enjoy Down Among the Dead Men, which was the previous story. That is about the Mornwatch, so the Mortalitasi, the Death Mages of Navarra. And I have reread Three Trees to Midnight, the first story in this collection, so many times that I also do really enjoy it now. I've tried reading. That was half the reason why I really wanted to read Tevinter Nights on stream. Is like I've tried reading it multiple times on my own, and I haven't been able to get myself to do it. So streaming it is a really good way for me to force myself through it, and then I have a surprisingly good time with everything. I have read a couple of the stories in here in the meantime. I've read, I want to say, one of the Lords of Fortune ones. I've read Wigmaker, because of course I've read Wigmaker. I've read Hunger, which was really good. Luck in the Gardens was a lot of fun. And I think those are the ones that I've read. I am pretty excited to also read Eight Little Talons. Simply because that features a bunch of favorite characters of mine from Dragon Age the Veilguard, so that's... I'm biased. What do you usually read, if I may be so bold to ask, Lebanon? I am legitimately curious, because I, um, am a recovering gifted child who used to read a lot as a kid, and now just does not read anymore. Um, so if you have any cool recommendations, I would be all ears for those. Mm. Doing another little sippy, because, oh my goodness, I am parched. Absolutely parched. 1, 2, 3. We've done 3 stories, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 stories more. Yes, young lady, are you here to interrupt the stream again? Are you? Meow? Hmm? Silly cat. But, yeah, so that was Horrors of Hormak. I really enjoyed reading it to you. It was a lot of fun. It touches on a whole bunch of, like, creepy, spoopy stuff. Oh, also got back into reading recently. That's nice. That's lovely. It's a thing that I've been like, it wasn't a New Year's resolution or anything, but like I have been wanting to get back into reading for years now. I have a little bit of an unofficial like little book swap with a bunch of my friends where we every time we get together we just like exchange exchange books. Older Star Wars book. Oh, that's so cool. D&D fantasy I can totally get behind. I am not well versed enough in Star Wars lore to know if the books are any good. Um but D&D stuff is great. I love D&D stuff. I used to in years before um used to read a bunch of fantasy. And I was also pretty big into crime and mystery stuff. So that was all a lot of fun. I really enjoyed reading some Agatha Christie for when I wrote my thesis. That was surprisingly fun. I I could do with Star Wars recommendations. You could leave them in the suggestion box actually if you want. Or hit me up on Blue Sky. You know where to find me now. I am very much open to recommendations on things to read um to try and get back into the swing of things. So yeah, that's lovely. That's awesome. I think though I'm going to wind down for tonight. Um Oh no. I will. I will do that. And I will see what those settings are about cuz I have legitimately no idea. Um yes, I'm going to wind down for tonight so that I can go to work again on time in the morning. um yeah, Blue Skies, I've had it for a while and I just keep forgetting that I have social media. I'm very smart. Oh boy, oh boy. At any rate, should anybody else be curious about my social media that I definitely do keep on track with, trust me, I really do. um, oh no, I'm using the incorrect. I am the goodest streamer. There we go. You never saw that. You never saw that I used the incorrect bump. It's late. It's been a long day. I'm very tired. we're doing we're doing a nice big sleep. Thank you, thank you. You can't tell, but I am totally bowing and basking in your applause right now. Thank you. Amazing. You're a great audience. It was legitimately lovely to have you. I will probably be back come Friday to play Dragon Age Origins, and then we'll do more disco dancing on Saturday. I feel like that's a good schedule to stick to for now. So, if I see you on Friday, I see you on Friday. If I see you on Saturday, I see you on Saturday. If I don't see you, have a lovely rest of your week. And until the next time, see you around.